We are back with another episode of Boots, Balls and Bras with myself, Fara Williams, and the amazing Anita Asante. Anita, I just saw you the other day, but what else have you been up to before the weekend I saw you?
Do you miss me already?
Yeah, it's been a day.
Yeah, obviously we did the game together, which is good fun. The FA Cup, the first of the two semi-finals. And then, yeah, I didn't do much the Sunday. I just watched a lot of football, with my dad as well. A lot of Premier League, a lot of WSL, obviously the FA Cup, I should say, the other semi-final. So yeah, just mad football. It's been a wild weekend.
Just mad football, yeah. Same with me. I mean, the Adobe Women's FA Cup semi-final took place over the weekend. We did the opening game on the Saturday, Chelsea-Liverpool. But we have to start, Neat, with the Manchester derby semi-final. City against Man United. United winning 2-0. What did you make of the game? I mean, it was a real fast and early start for Manchester United and got themselves ahead within 10 minutes of the game.
I think Manchester United came out as a team possessed. You know, there was so much intensity, so much confidence in their play. You know, they I think in the first half probably could have scored 3, 4, maybe more, goals just from the amount of chances they created, the final third entries and the fluidity of their play. And I think what was good to see about Man United is that there were so many key players that were just sort of firing on all cylinders, and actually enjoying the game. So yeah, like Bizet obviously was making loads of dynamic runs into the box, and Galton as well. I thought Clinton was really good. Tooney was really good as well in terms of her forward play, having the vision to see passes and play into space. And that put Man City on the back foot really early. And I don't think they kind of really got to grips with the intensity of how Man United started. What did you make of it?
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, look, we know defensively how well organised Manchester United have been this season. It was a game I was really looking forward to. Out of the two semi-finals, that was the one I was most looking forward to. And just because of the form of Man United, in terms of defensively, really hard to break down. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the game that they played earlier in the season, where United put that real high press on against Manchester City and actually really stifled their play and got the result in that first game in the WSL. And so I was looking forward to seeing if they'll do that again, or if they'll be a bit cagey, given it's a semi-final and one step away from a final. But look, they started all guns blazing, as you mentioned. The intensity they were pressing at, forcing errors from Kiara Keaton again in terms of her having to kick. And then they got the early goal. I thought the ball from Tooney, the vision for the goal was unbelievable. The way she turned and played that forward pass, and I thought that the chance from Bizet went. I thought her first touch wasn't great. She's obviously then got her back to goal, and the way she's then been able to cut back in on that right foot and bend it into the far corner. Obviously, Kiara Keaton has no chance with that shot on goal. I think it was well executed, but I actually thought that chance had gone. I thought she took way too many touches, giving up an opportunity, but. United, they started fast. They were well organised. They obviously pounced on the fact and took advantage of the fact that we have to mention the amount of injuries in this Manchester City lineup. I mean, there was a shot on the BBC where they zoomed into the stand and you saw the likes of Lauren Hemp and Bonnie Shaw and Vivian Miedema and Jill Roord and Alex Greenwood. And I was like, these 5 players I've just named will walk into any team in Europe,
Absolutely.
let alone Man City or Man United. So I was thinking, we're missing those 5 key players. I don't care who you are, it's going to have a huge impact. And I felt like they never had that leadership that was needed for Manchester City in order to kind of get back into the game. Hasegawa for me was their best player, really trying to control it, trying to play forward, trying to make things happen. But I think when that injury came to Fowler, I actually looked at the bench and I thought there's nothing that Manchester City can do in order to get back into this game. I think they gave a good account of themselves given the injury they gave. But United were too strong for them on the day, and I did expect that. I think they've gone under the radar. We've spoken a few times this season about United and how much we didn't expect them to be in the position they're in now. But they're in an FA Cup final. They want to retain their title from last year. They beat Spurs, they were there the year before when they lost to Chelsea. So it's the third time in a row now that they go to Wembley. And, that experience only puts them in a better position in order to really compete with this Chelsea team, who we know are going for the quadruple. And we'll talk about their game then. But what do you think of their chances going into the final now at Wembley against Chelsea?
Well, I never like to bet against Chelsea because we know they're a formidable squad and a team that can adapt in any game situation. We also know they're a side that doesn't have to be playing at their best to still find results and ways to win. So I think it's going to still be a really tough game for Man United. But I think from Man United's point of view, they've had a really good defensive record all season. They'll feel confident they're out of possession, that they have, really good understanding, really coordinated press. And they'll try and execute, I think, a game plan that will try to stifle Chelsea or at least force errors. I think from a Chelsea perspective, they're a team that are used to being in finals. So they've got experience, on their side. But they're not, they're still fallible. They've conceded goals in the last few matches. And they've shown some vulnerability. And I think Man United will be looking at the opposition they've played recently. Obviously, they drew with West Ham prior to the international break. They conceded against Man City during the Champions League rounds as well. So I feel that they'll be looking at those scenarios and thinking about how can we exploit this Chelsea team and capitalize on their own strengths. But of course, that quadruple chase is in the back of Chelsea minds, and they won't want to let anything slip up that unity.
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely. I think that's a cup final that I'm certainly looking forward to for different reasons. But let's just talk about, before we talk about the second semi-final, obviously the first one of the weekend, about Manchester City's positioning, because I think they're currently 7 points off of the top three. I've just listed only 5 of the injuries. There's obviously more to that. I think for Gino as well, she's injured, and there's a couple more that I saw within the stand. But they have a huge list of injuries. They, in my opinion, don't have great squad depth, and I think that proved it yesterday in the game against Man United. So they're out of the FA Cup. They obviously lost the League Cup, and they're 7 points off Champions League spots. Do you think they have a chance of making that top 3, or do you think it's beyond them now?
You never like to count Man City out because of, they're just Man City. Like, they're a great club with a, strong legacy as well. But I do think it's out of reach now. They've still got Man United to play out of the rest of those league fixtures. Yes, they've got Leicester City, they've got Crystal Palace. I can't remember the other side, but I think they're vulnerable at the moment. They're a team that are missing major players, as you've mentioned, who can galvanize the team, score goals, create chances, and they don't look a threat in the same way. And I think opposition teams are smelling that vulnerability a little bit in their team. And I think, it's important to mention, I think when you're players that don't play consistently in a team and then suddenly you're called upon, like some of the younger players that we've seen playing in this Man City side, there's going to be a bit of a psychological kind of like pressure on them to rise to the occasion and expectation to perform. And it helps to have those experienced players next to you that you can rely on and lean on. And sometimes they take more responsibility than you, or they help you through a game. And Man City, for me, just don't have that right now. But they also don't have that presence on the pitch either. So that's why I think Man United, are going to secure that top 3, position, because they just are a team with so much momentum, so much balance, real key figures. And even in that game, Tallis Joyce, her saves pulled out, incredible saves, that are season defining types of moments when your goalkeeper steps up and makes incredible saves like that. So I think it's gone for them. They're trophyless. They're trailing in the league, out of Champions League. They just want to finish, I think, as strongly as possible. And they really need to push that reset button going into next season.
Most definitely. Yeah, I think 7 points the gap is too big. I know United do have a tough run in because they've got obviously Chelsea, Manchester City and Arsenal last game this season. So they do have a tough remaining fixtures. But as you say, it's all in their hands. And I feel like Man United are a team that even if they don't win, they don't lose, because they don't concede many goals. So They pick up a point, and that will certainly be enough. It'll be interesting if we obviously see Marc Skinner signed a new contract, but it'd be interesting if Nick Cushing decides to stay come the end of the season. But Nick, just before we move on to Chelsea Liverpool, I was having a big argument yesterday because when Tullis-Joyce made that double save from the free kick, and I can't remember who the header, I think it might have been Lily Murphy that headed it towards goal. I can't remember off the top of my head. I thought it was a double save, right? And my mates argue with me, telling me that it was headed straight at Tullis-Joyce. I'm like, mate, she's on the floor going the opposite way and had to get up and stick her leg out. I mean, I need a goalkeeper to comment on this little now and tell me, was it a fantastic double save, or was the striker, was it a striker's header that was really poor and should have scored it? Because honestly, I was having the biggest debate, and they were like, no, it wasn't. Yeah, it was headed straight at her. But let's we'll move on, because Chelsea Liverpool, that was on a Saturday afternoon, and we were there at Kings Meadow in the beautiful sunshine, and it would be a tight game. We thought Liverpool would come and upset the party a little bit, and it looked like it was going to be that way. I think, certainly Olivia Smith's goal and her impact down that right-hand side in the first half. I mean, I thought she was exceptional, and I thought the game plan Liverpool adopted in that first half was working in their favour before, obviously, Erin Cuthbert late equalised before the half. But what did you make of that opening 45 for Liverpool?
Yeah, it was a really strong start for Liverpool. Again, a team that came out with intent. They were pressing intent, aggressive. Every player with that front-footed mentality. You could see they had a clear game plan from the start of the game. We talked about it, didn't we? How they were trying to play through their right-hand side where they could find Olivia Smith and Kiernan in particular. And they had a bright start, which obviously led to them capitalizing off that chance. And again, Olivia Smith rising to those moments, cool, calm, collected finish. And she's just such a baller. Like, she's just such an exciting player to watch. And you always feel like things can happen. But, I think Chelsea, the defending at times was a little bit concerning, and I think it is concerning when you think about them going into a semi-final in the Champions League against a really top formidable team. That's something I think they really have to address before then.
Yeah, and we'll talk about those Champions League games. But you're right. I thought, certainly down that right-hand side with Olivia Smith, I thought, she had huge impact. One, a fearless player, a player that is so direct, quick, fast, aggressive, actually has the confidence to go 1v1 in those areas. And I thought her goal was really, really well taken. I thought that was the difference in the game. When they had to take her out of the game, obviously she's returning from a hip injury, and so she could only play, I think she was on limited minutes anyway. And I feel like when she came out the game at 1-1, in terms of their outlet, they kind of lost at Liverpool. And, they had to soak up pressure in the second half from Chelsea. Chelsea upped the gears a little bit. There wasn't, the intensity was a little bit better. I thought the first half they were very flat. I put it down to maybe international break. I think that doesn't help. I think for the women's teams, coming back and having 1 day's training really don't help. Always, I feel like the games after international were always quite slow. It felt like that way, certainly Chelsea in the opening 45. But they always seem to find that they're just, in my opinion, they're just so ruthless. Like, at times they're not attractive. They can be very boring to watch. And I'm sure not many people will say that, but I think at times I'm like, they slow the game down, and I guess they'll see it as controlling it, but they at times don't look that exciting. But one thing you do know, if you want to watch a team that are guaranteed to win, you tune into Chelsea women, because that's what they do. They just know how to win games. As I say, that first half, I completely wrote them off. Didn't think they'd get back into it. And then Erin Cuthbert, who we, countless amount of times we've spoken about her on our pod, about, what she brings to this Chelsea team. I thought her goal was fantastic. The way she took it first time gave, Rachel Laws absolutely no chance of even adjusting her feet to make the save. I thought, if she took a touch, maybe Rachel Laws would have got to that. But the fact she's hit it and looped it first time. But that's on the 47th minute. They're like 2 minutes into extra time, another minute on the clock before the whistle, and they put their team back at 1-1. And that's what Erin Cuthbert does. And we saw that as well in the League Cup final against Manchester City. She just drags that Chelsea team back into the game time after time. And as I said, I don't know what was said at halftime. I thought Chelsea were a lot better in the second half, certainly more dominant in terms of areas that they got themselves into. There was a lot of balls from wide areas. Aggie Beever-Jones had a lot of chances in the second half. There was one that she hit, it just on the penalty spot, and I thought this is in. And Rachel Laws pulled off a fantastic save, but it was coming for her. I felt like, you know, she kept getting herself in those positions. Yes, she was taking too many touches at times. Yes, she was missing chances that on another day were going to the back of the net, but she stayed active, she stayed alive, and that the little dink pass from Baltimore, you know, into the middle of the goal, just missing the centre half, and Aggie Beever with a 95th minute winner, was it, or something like that, 94th minute winner, a header, and you can just never write this team off. I mean, we were in punditry for the BBC, and we were writing our script, we were going to extra time, and she just popped up, and that's what Chelsea do. They just have a ruthless mentality that is unmatched, in my opinion, from any other team. And you know, it reminds me a little bit of the Arsenal team you grew up playing in, where they were just ruthless, and no matter what, whether they were good, bad, or whatever, they got results. They had this fear factor that teams had against them going into it, and it just poses a question, I think, Neats, and something that I wanted to ask you. Do you think, given what Emma Hayes has done in terms of that legacy that she built within this team, and now Sonia Van coming in and maybe taking it, looks like, to another level, do you think they have it in them to be dominant for maybe the next 5-10 years within the WSL and maybe even Europe, depending on how far they get this year?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all the stats, results over this season and the seasons prior would suggest so. They're already established it. They've already established the dominance, you know, to some degree, at least in the WSL. Now it's about replicating that on the European stage and being able to get to finals, win finals, and do that continuously. That's got to be the next big ambition. I think the fact that you said there, you know, they're not a team that necessarily always play the most attractive football or the most consistent, if you like, style of play, but they are relentless. And they will bombard you, you know, and we saw that with Liverpool. Liverpool couldn't get control of the ball and keep possession just to rest a little bit, because the intensity of their pressure, the intensity of controlling that final third possession and creating chances, it just wears teams down. And that's what I think they've added to their play, is it's that mental ruthlessness to keep believing in what they're doing. Even Aggie Beever-Jones, she's still a very young forward, but she didn't stop making those runs. She didn't stop finding herself in the box for those chances. For me, in Europe, it's about now having a psychological belief that they can go out there and go toe-to-toe with Barcelona and dominate them, or even if they don't dominate them, create chances to score. That's got to be, you know, the forefront of their mind. But I don't see why not. I think it's a lot tougher to do in this era, if you like, because there are so many good quality teams, not only in the WSL but across Europe. So, you know, we've seen that with the likes of Lyon, who used to dominate, who are not dominating right now. So it's a changing of the guard constantly. It's about now who's going to be that next club that kind of hold on to that. And Barca looks like the club that could do that. But, you know, Chelsea have to now really believe they can go on and take down the champions of Europe.
Definitely. And well, yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think who's to say they can't? Certainly WSL dominate again for the next 5-10 years. But as you say, that European psychological kind of break, we'll see what happens this year and if they can overcome that. But that rounds up the Adobe Women's FA Cup semi-final. So the final will take place at Wembley on Sunday, the 18th, of May, and it will be Chelsea versus Man United. So if you haven't got your tickets, make sure you get them, because it will be an exciting one. But Nietzsche, you mentioned there, we touched on Europe. You spoke about Lyon. You spoke about Barcelona. We spoke about Chelsea, and we've got Arsenal. And the first of the two semi-finals, Arsenal are taking on Lyon. It's 12:30 on Saturday. We'll be covering that game, TNT, one that I'm really excited about. But when you look at Arsenal, will be playing midweek. So they've got a game, I think it's on Wednesday. But they have a game midweek, and then they've got to go and play and face Lyon on Saturday at 12:30. So do you think, two things, do you think that the midweek game is helpful for them in terms of kind of getting a game under their belt before this semi-final, given the fact that they've been away on international? Or do you think they would have liked to have not played that midweek game and just go straight into the Lyon game at the weekend?
No, I actually think it's good for them, personally. I think because, you know, they didn't play this weekend. You're coming back off an international break. You've had maybe a few more days of training, get the players back in, get them set and focused on the games ahead. You kind of want to rebuild those connections as quickly as possible, the relationships on the pitch, and just get a feeling for being on the pitch together again, playing a game together, still having goals. Like, they want to win midweek against Leicester. Yeah. They also have a squad that I think has a lot of depth now. So there's opportunities for other players to get some playing minutes, which is always helpful this stage in the season when you're still in competitions as they are. I mean, you could see it either way, but as a player, I think it's probably a nice thing to get back into game mode in terms of your mindset, and also just physically being on the pitch and experiencing that again. And Lyon is a big team, big game ahead. I don't know if you'd want that much time to not play, before going into such a big game. I don't know. For me personally, I think it's not necessarily the worst thing that happen. They could still get off to a really good start against Leicester, and you can start resting players. That would be probably Renee's kind of game plan, is if she can do that, then she probably will, and still have them ready to go into Lyon.
Yeah, and definitely, I think, in terms of, it's not the worst team to play against in terms of Leicester, and kind of getting that confidence, momentum and rhythm going into a massive game for Arsenal. But I think this game is, both of the semi-finals, and we'll touch on Chelsea Barca after this, but this game, you look at the momentum Arsenal have had, you look at what and how they turned over Real Madrid in that quarterfinal, unbelievable turnaround. They absolutely piled on the pressure at the Emirates in that second leg and won 3-0, and it could have easily been 8-0, the amount of chances they had. But they are facing a Lyon team that, as you mentioned, in terms of Europe, one of the best, if not the best, in terms of how many trophies they won, Champions League trophies they won. But just running through Lyon's squad depth, it is absolutely stacked with talent. Like, I was looking at their midfield and I'm like, the Brits, Marajan, Haran and the Donk. I was, and then you're looking at in terms of attack, Hegerberg, they've got Diani, they've obviously got Chawanga, they've Lasoma, and I'm thinking, and then if you think Lasoma, and then you think of their back, and I'm just like, they are literally in every area, every department, completely stacked. So, and then I look at Arsenal, and it's pretty much the same in terms of, you look at their front line, they've got plenty of options, midfield area, plenty of options in terms of tactically how they want to, approach the game. They can do it in many different ways. So tactically, this game is really exciting. But if we was to pick out, say, I don't know, an area of the field or I don't know, battle, like, what would you say? What most excites you? I've got one. I think whether it be Diani or is it Chawanga? How you pronounce it?
Chawanga, yeah.
Chawanga or Diani up against Katie McCabe. That excites me. That excites me because I know Katie McCabe rises to the challenge. She loves that competitiveness. Yeah. And so that's an area that I'm like, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And look, I know what Arsenal means to Katie. She's a good friend of mine, but that is an area that I think, she is going to be bang up for this game, and she's coming up against good opposition, and she likes to prove herself. And I think if you're tuning into that, that's certainly down that right-hand side for Lyon, with Carpenter in behind them. And then obviously you've got Katie McCabe, and I would imagine Ford in front of her on the left-hand side. I think that area of the pitch is going to be an exciting one.
I was literally going to just echo that, Farah, but I was literally just going to say attack for defense. Like both ends, like Chawinga, Diani, whoever it is, Lasome, that front three or whoever they decide to play up against that Arsenal back line is going to be one of the battles of ages to watch. Yeah. And vice versa with Arsenal's front line, with the confidence they're exuding right now with Alessia Russo, Ford, Chloe Kelly, obviously Mead can come on, all these players, Caldente, Arsenal's got a brilliant squad at the moment as well. So going against that experienced defence as well, you've got Selma Baca, you've got Renard, all these players that you're just like, wow. I think,
and then I think goalkeepers as well. And I think goalkeepers is so important at this stage of I'm saying a tournament, a competition. For example, an Endler in goal for Lyon. One of the best, if not the best, women's goalkeeper around at the minute. And then if you look at Arsenal and the errors that they've been making lately in terms of their goal.
100%. This game is literally a do not disturb game, isn't it? Like, do you know what I mean? That is what this game is. Do not disturb. Yeah. Like, fully engrossed. It's really exciting. And I think obviously Arsenal are at home first, am I correct?
Yeah.
They want to get off to a good start at home, you know, and
Mm.
get a good result and build that confidence and just pile all the pressure back on Lyon, I think. So yeah, you know, fingers crossed. I think they're obviously really solid when they play at home at the Emirates. Amongst their home fans, they're going to want to utilize that kind of atmosphere and energy as well, just to give them that momentum early.
Most definitely. But you know what, Nick? I mean, out of the 4 remaining teams in the competition, it's hard to pick, because on any given day, any of these teams at their best are worthy winners of this competition. So, you know, we can predict, we can sit here and think and give, you know, positives and negatives as to what team will win what. But I think in terms of both semi-finals, very unpredictable in terms of who's going to, you know, come out on top. But it's certainly one that I'm really looking forward to. And, you know, fingers crossed Arsenal are able to do the job in both legs. And also Chelsea, and we're talking Chelsea now because they face Barcelona away on Sunday at 5 p.m. And just talking about that game in terms of, obviously, we know at this stage last year, it was Barcelona. Chelsea went away and got that 1-0 victory, Erin Cuthbert. But I remember speaking just before the second leg and said, Chelsea poked the bear. Do not poke this Barcelona bear, because if you do, they will come back at you. And they did, and they come back to Stamford Bridge. And, you know, Bonmati, who, you know, exceptional player, obviously turned the tie around in that game at Stamford Bridge last season. Will it be something that will be playing on the minds of these Chelsea players? And, you know, are they going to be remembering this moment that they felt last year at the same stage of the competition? Or do you think that actually was a clean slate for them, having a new manager, a couple of fresh faces, obviously Lucy Bronze and Kira Walsh both coming to Chelsea from Barcelona? Do you think that their insights maybe give an added advantage to Chelsea in terms of the approach of the game? Will Sonia be leading them a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, like, firstly, the players that played in that game will remember. You know, there's no way they can't not remember. You know, that feeling would have hurt. They would have burned them. They would have been thinking, I never want to experience that again. Right? So there's no way they can't. But I think the fact that this is a new squad, this is a new season under a new manager, there is that kind of freshness and reset to the Chelsea team. She's a manager who's been there. She's done it. She will they'll be able to, you know, lean on her experience, her knowledge of these occasions. As you mentioned, players that have played at Barca before, Kira Walsh and of course Lucy Bronze, they will have all the intel to be able to help their teammates understand the weaknesses of Barcelona and the individual players and how they can go out and try and exploit that. But I think with games like this, we forget everything else, the tactical, the technical. Games like this are just about the belief and the want and the will and the fight and the confidence to do things in a sort of fluid manner, do things with 100% intention, whether that's pressing the ball, that's whether you're winning your duels, because that's what allows you to establish a footing in the game before you get to your technical, before you get to your tactical. So I think if Chelsea can execute those things early, which I'm sure they will, you know, we've raved about Erin Cuthbert and players like Millie Bright, Lucy Bronze. They are, like, you know, we've said it time and time again, mentality monsters, but they're going to go in there with that kind of ruthlessness that they want to win every battle. And they're going to have to execute an unbelievable game plan and everybody be so hot on it in terms of their individual kind of roles and responsibilities if they're going to kind of exploit a very, very good Barcelona team. But we've seen teams do it. Man City did it, you know, in the group stages. So they are also fallible. They lost in the league as well. So, you know, there are weaknesses within this Barca team if you can find it and if you can really utilize the opportunities they give you.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think they're certainly they are fragile, you know, in certain areas within their team. It's whether the teams can find it early and exploit it. And I think what we do know about this Barcelona teams is that it's very rare they lose over 2 legs. So they might lose the first leg, but it's very rare you've seen them, certainly in recent seasons, lose a 2-legged game. And even if you look at the group stage, they lost to Man City and didn't just lose, they were dominated by the Manchester City team in the early stages of the group. But that weren't going to happen again, and they proved that when they played them again. So I think Chelsea will remember that from last season. You know, you can beat them on a one-off occasion, and I would say in terms of Chelsea's defence, they for the second leg didn't have Ramirez, and I thought Ramirez made a huge impact out in Barcelona in the opening leg when they come away with that 1-0 victory. But we know back home at Stamford Bridge they were without Ramirez, and I think that changed the dynamic of the game completely. I thought she was a real threat out in Barca. For Chelsea, so I do think they are beatable. I mean, I covered the Barcelona-Wolfsburg game, and it was interesting because Barcelona were quite slow in terms of their possession, and fullbacks didn't really join in. They allowed wingers to go 1v1, and I was like, come on, they need some energy. They need to penetrate. These passes need to be more purposeful. It was slow, and all of a sudden, Bommani makes one dynamic run in beyond the back line, puts the ball across the box, creates chaos inside the Wolfsburg defence, and gets and they concede an own goal. And then it goes from 1-0 in a game that you thought nothing was going to happen, and then you end up dominating and scoring 4 goals. So that's certainly something we know Barcelona can do. They can kind of lead you into a game and thinking, you know what, we've got a chance, and all of a sudden they switch a flick flick the switch, flick the switch, and they can up their tempo within games, and they did that against Wolfsburg. And having seen Chelsea at the weekend against Liverpool, they're going to have to up their intensity if they are to take anything away from this game out in Barcelona, because in my opinion they were too slow, wasn't dynamic enough, didn't play with enough speed with the ball. They did in the second half a little bit better, but look, against this Barcelona team, you can't pick your moments. You have to be on it for 90 minutes and 180 minutes over 2 legs.
Faz, I wanted to ask you, obviously, like, Barca are scary in the fact that the way they set aside Wolfsburg as well is a scary prospect, because Wolfsburg are not some pushover team. You know, this is a team with a massive legacy, really good players, and they completely dominated them in that return leg. But do you think it helps Chelsea going away first to Barca?
It's an interesting one, because I thought last season, brilliant. You know, they go away to Barca, they can get a result and come back and, then play at Stamford Bridge with the fans behind them, and you kind of that confidence in knowing you've been away. Coming back to Stamford Bridge 1-0 last year, I thought, yes, they've got this. Like, they can just defend, they can play in transition, and I mean, obviously saw what happened last year. So I don't know. I'd like to think it does. I think, certainly if they can go there and get a big result, they would need more than 1 goal. I think they'll realise that from last year. Then it helps. But you know what it's like when you're ahead in a tie anyway. The way you approach a game, just for whatever reason, you look at the 2 ties that were turned around. Chelsea were 2-0 down to Manchester City in the quarterfinal. Arsenal were 2-0 down to Real Madrid, and it's not complacency, because I don't think Manchester City or Real Madrid approach that game with any complacency. But your game plan changes slightly because you've got something to hold on to. And I feel like when the reins were let off in both of those games, them second legs for Arsenal and for Chelsea, we saw what happened. Create more chances, get early goals, play with better intensity. Sometimes when you are ahead and you kind of got the reins on a little bit, I'm not sure that helps. So I definitely think they need a result out in Barcelona to give them that advantage. But then the second half, I'm saying, so the second leg, it changes in terms of that approach. And I feel like that's where Chelsea went wrong last season. In terms of their approach, they were in the first leg of Barca last season. I thought defensively so well organised, had a game plan, an obvious game plan. Obviously, they had Ramirez in transition that really helped. But yeah, I'm kind of sitting on the fence a little bit. I haven't probably answered your question, because I think it's a difficult one. As a player, the confidence in having that lead is brilliant. To come home and go, we've got something to hold on to. But then the approach has to remain the same as it did that got you that first result. And maybe that answers it. So yeah, look, I'm excited for both semi-finals, and as I say, I can't pick it either way. What I love is an all WSL and all English final. I think that'll be absolutely brilliant. And I'm sure Arsenal will want that. And I'm sure Arsenal, if Chelsea are on to do the quadruple, will want to be the team that stopped them, given the fact that they're the only team to ever do that. So, there's many stories and scripts wrote within it. So, I'm excited for the weekend in the semi-final. I'm not going to give a prediction either way, because I think it's so hard to pick. But what I will say is that these are games that as any fan, any football fan, you don't want to miss them, because I think they're very exciting games to look forward to.
Also, another do not disturb game. Just to point out.
But that pretty much sums up our preview. But we will be talking about the games over the weekend anyway on next week's pod, and I'm sure we'll have a lot, more detailed talk after those two games, because seeing them live will be amazing. And as I say, we'll have a lot more to say after that opening leg that will build us into the second leg. But that pretty much sums up our Boots, Balls and Bras. We've got a couple of questions, Neats, from fans, but yeah, that sums up the Adobe women's semi-finals, and we now know who's in the final, and obviously the Champions League preview. But a couple of questions you got for us?
Yeah, we got two questions. One from Nick Seymour. Female coaches, what can be done to encourage more/keep in the WSL?
Pay them more money. Pay them what they are worth. Because, from my understanding, in terms of salaries, in terms of not just females, this is not just females, not about females, it's about having the best coaches, in my opinion, to make our players better, give them the best opportunity to be the best they can be. But the salary is just in terms of the workload, in terms of what the output is of a coach. I mean, you've been there in those environments. You know how much that your phone don't turn off, your mind don't switch off, you don't have a minute, you don't have any family time. You're like 24/7. Living, breathing, eating, shitting, everything football, right? So in terms of that, I think in order to keep females, the best females within the game and the best male coaches in our game, you have to pay them a salary that's worth keeping them. I don't know. That's all I can say.
Where to unpick this, Farah? There's so many levels to this.
It is, and I think one of the main ones, though, is you got to pay people what they're worth, and we want the best, and you got to value them. And, most people will value themselves through money.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's two strands, isn't there? Getting females into coaching. So making it feasible for them to get their coaching badges and things like that. We know there's a gender pay gap in society in general, but we're still expecting women to pay, extortionate sums to even get that education. And then secondly, like you said, pay them properly, give them the chance to, be able to commit and dedicate all their time and energy into being the best coaches that they can be. And thirdly, stop having this kind of exceptionalism mentality to female coaches. It's almost like because they're women, they have to be even better than our counterparts at times to be considered for a role, or even, be respected as those female coaches or leaders. Like everyone starts somewhere, and they need to be supported through that journey so they can become the top level elite coaches. And a lot of clubs are seeking Champions League managers now. Well, not everybody starts coaching at Champions League level. They have to get there. So how can we help them reach those kind of levels as well?
There's no pathway. There's no pathway, is there really? Like what I'm saying, that coaching was something that we both wanted to do coming out of the game. But in terms of the opportunity pathway to be able to, not just be a coach within a team that does, small group sessions or whatever, but actually to be able to take full control of a session and do the bigger picture stuff. You don't get opportunities at the bigger, I'm saying the bigger teams, and what I mean by bigger teams is WSL 1 teams, right? But even in the championship, it's about results. The game now is about results, and it's not about development. And whilst it's always about results and not development, how do you develop coaches within environments to then, be ready to take these big jobs? But look, we can rant, and this is a whole different subject that we could maybe spend a whole podcast on about female coaching and coaching within the female game, because it's not, as I say, it's not just about female coaches. It's about having the best coaches within the female game to make our players better. That's how I see it.
100%. You summarised that perfectly, Faz. And the next question is from @3Rodney. With Michelle Agyemang's awesome debut for the Lionesses, what does her pathway look like into more first team minutes? And for the Ghanaians out there, hopefully I pronounced her last name correctly, because I should do, being a Ghanaian, but oh well.
You know what? It's difficult. I feel like she's on loan from Arsenal at Brighton at the minute, and I feel like she would probably like more minutes within that loan. I don't think she's probably had the amount of minutes she probably would have liked. But Neets, you've worked closely with her. I've seen her play for the 23s last month, and then obviously she had a huge impact in the 19s qualifying for the European Championship. and then to score in her debut after 42 seconds was it? And
wow,
not just scoring. People that score in their debut, sometimes it's like one of those, you're just in an area at the right time and the ball comes to you and it's kind of an easy, the goalies. I mean, the take and the volley, I was like, what? She just felt at home in that environment. And I guess like when you have those qualities anyway, it's quite easy to settle when you're around good players. But I thought her goal was unbelievable. The technical detail on that finish was, superb. But I think it's about getting more minutes, more regular minutes at Brighton for sure. But I'm sure Arsenal will have their eye on her returning next year and keeping her within the squad and making their squad depth a lot better. In terms of the Lionesses, if they're talking about first-team Lionesses, has she given herself an opportunity now to go to the Euros in the summer? She doesn't do herself any harm in terms of that, that performance, that 10 minutes that she got within the game. She's done herself no harm. So if she can get some more minutes in these remaining 5 games, as I say, there's a big squad that go away with England, and we need goal scorers. We need people that can impact games. She's shown that at all levels, 23s, 19s, and now at seniors. Why not? Why not be a wild card? It's great when we see wild cards. She could be the wild card that none of us have spoken about this season, has actually come from nowhere and shown that at that level. She probably can, give something, offer something different to what we already have.
When she scored that goal, Farah, when she came on in her debut, I literally turned into one of my aunties. I was like, hey! Literally, I was like, like what? Like it blew my mind, first and foremost, because I was just like, wow. And then I thought, the family group chat's going to be blowing up, of course. She's repping. But then to add to that, just the confidence to come into a game like that, play the way we know she can play. We've seen her do it at 19s. That's one of the reasons she got pulled into the 23s, is because of her performances with the 19s and how well she's doing. And everybody in our 23s, from us as a coaching staff and players, her talent, her ability is undeniable. Everyone has been impressed with what she can do and how she displays that, and the maturity at which she carries herself on and off the pitch. And I think, as you say, why not? Why can't she be the wild card? Why can't she be that emerging talent to just shine in this tournament and be that spark for this Lionesses side? We've all talked about how can this Lionesses team keep evolving, changing, whatever. She could be that, potentially, that impact player or whatever, however they utilize her. But I think it's a brilliant time for us to be able to witness this and see her growth. And as you say, I think she needs more domestic playing minutes to really, for her own development. But there's no way Arsenal aren't looking at her thinking, what, she's back as returning back to club and helping them into next season as well.
So Serena Biegman, if you do listen to Boots, Balls and Bras, we would like to say take her as a wild card. But guys, thanks for listening to BBB this week. Make sure you like, comment and subscribe to never miss an episode. Also, if you have anything you'd like us to discuss, make sure you send it in and we're more than happy to discuss that. Neats, that's it from us this week. I will see you at the weekend for the semi-finals of the Women's Champions League.
Can't wait to be reunited. See you then.